Isn't it amazing, though? This is Yahweh's Moedim. From the prophetic word that went out from Carrie to what the world and the religious organizations will be partaking of tomorrow, to what we have been studying and digging into, is amazing. Because this is unleavened bread. And the leaven that needs to be purged is in each and every one of us. And part of that is those leavenous doctrines, a huge part of that as believers. Josiah, his Hebrew name is Yoshiyahu. So yeah, those J's, they really are quite conflicting to the tongue, especially as we begin to delve more into the Hebrew and the language and the wonderful linguistic power that we see in the text. So Josiah, Yoshiyahu. And what we're going to see, if you actually were to turn back in the Torah, it is written in Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 31, that the law would be read every 7 years. It would be read at the Feast of Sukkot. And oftentimes in congregations, when they go out and celebrate Sukkot, you literally have the continuous reading of the Torah over the 7 days, because that's a tradition that is done over at Sukkot. But you'll see in the 31st verse of Devarim, Deuteronomy, the 31st chapter and the 24th verse, why Yoshiyahu and why we see in our text both the book of the covenant and the book of the law. Because so it was when Moshe had completed writing the words of this law in a book. Writing the words of a law in the book would be a book of the law. When they were finished, that Moshe commanded the Levites who bore the Ark of the Covenant, because the Ark of the Covenant would carry the book of the covenant. Now we're starting to think like Melchizedek, aren't we? We're starting to. It's a change of thinking. John came up to me and he said, "That's right. You know, we can read. You know, the Melchizedek slain before the foundations of the world." You're like, well, it doesn't say that. It says the lamb that was slain. But is the lamb the Melchizedek Kohen Hagadol? I mean, these are the statements, the power of who he truly is. Because last time I checked, he was the Passover lamb, but he didn't end as Brother Gil just said. I mean, it's all coming together. I mean, we celebrate Passover. We need to celebrate first fruits, because it didn't end with Passover. It actually began with the fact that he rose from the dead for a specific purpose, which was to put that Passover blood on the Yom Kippur in the heavenlies, as we will see, because the heavenlies were defiled, because they needed to be cleansed, as the writer of the book of Hebrews tells us. So it was when Moshe completed writing the words of this law in a book, when they were finished, that Moshe commanded the Levites who bore the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, saying, "Take this book of the law and put it beside the ark of the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, that it may be there as a witness against you." Of course, we understand that it is a witness against you because you broke the covenant. It is therefore going to testify against you until the time of Reformation. And now we understand that Yeshua is the final Melchizedek Kohen Hagadol. He's the final Melchizedek high priest. It says death reigned from Adam to Moshe. We know that Adam was the first Melchizedek priest here on this earth, and that Moshe Rabbeinu was the last Melchizedek. That's why Yahweh said he'd slaughter the nation and he would begin to make a new nation out of his Melchizedek who hadn't got involved in the sin. But ultimately now we are with Yeshua, who is our Kohen Hagadol, our final Melchizedek high priest. And he's been manifest in the Melchizedek high priests and priests that were walking in the covenants of promise way, way long ago. So we'll discover that the writer of the book of Hebrews understood that the high priest track me with this, that the high priest actually attained the Melchizedek through resurrection. That the high priest could attain the Melchizedek through resurrection. And that is hugely significant because it is a finished work. And the writer of Hebrews chapter 8 verse 1 says, and he sits down, quoting an enthronement psalm, Psalm 110, at the right hand of the Father. You can only sit down once the work is finished and you have attained the Melchizedek. So the writer of the book of Hebrews understood that the high priest had attained the Melchizedek through resurrection, that the Melchizedek was raised up. Melchizedek was resurrected to the eternal priesthood, which he held by the power of an indestructible life. Psalm 110, like I said, it's the enthronement psalm. It's set in the Holy of Holies of heaven. It's set in the Holy of Holies of heaven. Not a Levitical earthly temple realm. And you see, we've got to change our thinking. Because you could read that, and many do in Talmudic Judaism, as a Levitical temple realm. But it's not. It's a heavenly temple realm. It's not a Levitical temple realm. It's not an earthly realm. But in Yahweh's realm that we now live, a human, that's you and me, we can become the Melchizedek through the ritual of the Holy of Holies in heaven. What did he just say? Because this is the power of anointing in your lives that you have attained through the Feast of First Fruits, the resurrection of Yeshua. I'll say it again. A human could become a Melchizedek through the ritual of the Holy of Holies in heaven. And later, the Garden of Eden. And that's what Yeshua has ultimately returned us to. He's returned us to an Edenic temple. Yeshua has returned us to an Edenic temple right now. Right now. And if you think Ashtoreth has got anything to do with the Edenic temple, you're not going to get the anointing. You're not going to receive. You're not stewarding what you've got. You can sit down. Or not. I want to take hold of that in this life that we have. I really, truly do. Now, the damaged ancient text of Psalm 110, it's not Masoretic. I'm not fond of the Masoretic text. But the oldest Greek text, it says, in the glory of the holy ones, that's the angels, I have begotten you. The damaged Hebrew also mentions dew as part of the process because dew, I'll say it in your vernacular, is a symbol of resurrection. In Psalm 110 verse 3, it says, from the womb dew comes forth. What does that mean? What? From the womb dew comes forth. New birth. New birth is new life, and it is synonymous with resurrection. Correct? A new state is birthed in the heavenly Holy of Holies. And we all have blood inside of us. And that's, like I said last week, Yahweh's secret weapon. That he is truly and can truly change your blood. He can change your blood through the Melchizedek. Because it's already happened with Yeshua in the heavenly realm. Oh, you are speaking way if you are carnal and in the flesh, this will mean nothing to you. I can't help you. I truly can't. But I don't have time to mess around with the foolishness of this world. I truly don't. Because time is short and we have to get into a spiritual realm. That doesn't mean that we're not living here in the world, but I am not thinking of the world. I'm thinking of heavenly things. Because ultimately the rug is going to be pulled out from underneath you all in this world, and then you either will fall or you will be living in a supernatural realm. Now Enoch spoke of the high priest and Mark the archangel, and they're actually summoned to remove Enoch's earthly clothes, which is his mortal body, and clothe him in garments of glory, the resurrected body. That's in 2nd Enoch. So the high priest was understood to have undergone a transfiguration. Did Yeshua undergo a transfiguration? And a resurrection as a son of Elohim. Long before the apostles wrote about these things. Long before. In fact, if you look into the Dead Sea Scrolls, I have a copy at home, it's fascinating, and that's a crazy. I mean, these things happen to me. It's a story in itself. I have to tell you the story because it is important. It is hugely important. How I have a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls, a book on the Dead Sea Scrolls, not the actual, obviously. Because it's very important, because these things come into my life and your guys' life supernaturally. Oh, you're just imagining that. No, I meet this guy at Starbucks. He invites me round his house. I go round his house and he tells me that he was moved to Israel by his dad when he was a young boy, and that he's written off the faith. He totally doesn't believe in it because his dad went to Israel because he believed that he was one of the 2 witnesses. Moved the whole family over there. So I'm sitting in his house and he doesn't believe anything. He doesn't believe in the virgin birth. He doesn't believe in resurrection. And I'm taking him through the text and I'm trying to show him the difference between the Masoretic text and the Septuagint, and I'm trying to show him the virgin birth. And I'm teaching him in his apartment. And I know that I have been ordained to do this and to speak the truth no matter what. That this is my opportunity before this man to witness to him the truth. I knew it. And I knew that I had to go, and I did it. He gave me a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls. A day or 2 later, or sometime later, he's driving, because he was commuting, back from Portland, my age, driving, dead. Done. Brain aneurysm. Dead. Every time I pick up that book. But I got the opportunity. I don't know what he did with it. But these are powerful things. Now that is part of the testimony of my life. You can't take that from me. Because I experienced that. And now when I read these things, and I'm learning about the Melchizedek, I'm reading it. It's not just something, these are powerful, interconnected things that Yahweh uses in all of our lives. And you shall overcome Satan by the word of your testimony and the blood of the Lamb. That's part of my testimony. And it's now enabled me to be able to stand up and teach more about it. I mean, amazing stuff. How Yahweh truly works in all of our lives. All of our lives. And people get ripped off from the faith because somebody did this or their dad showed them this, and we make mistakes. We get hurt, and then people shut off and they don't want to receive any more truth. But we've got to overcome those hurts. We've got to overcome those circumstances so we can continue to grow. So we can continue to persevere. The high priest was understood to have undergone transfiguration and resurrection as a son of Elohim long before the apostles wrote in these terms. This transformation was lost with the book of the law. It no longer happened. It no longer could happen. It was part of the promises that were associated with the book of the covenant. Because who was the last Melchizedek? Moshe Rabbeinu. It was lost. It was lost And if we think that we haven't received it, then we're not truly walking in the fullness of Yeshua. A whole book of the Bible is dedicated to the Melchizedek. It's the book of Hebrews. Get your head around it. A whole book of the Bible. It's pretty important. It's the fifth gospel. It truly is. It's the fifth gospel for this age. I mean, everyone says, oh no, the book of Revelation is the fifth gospel. Yeah, take your rice and beans and live in fear. But you know what? I tell you what, there's more. There's more. We were talking earlier this week. The power isn't going to be in the weapons of the world, but it is in the weapons of our warfare. Literally, thunderbolts, right? Laser beams. Turn to Leviticus 16, verse 17, and look at the text. The transformation of the human into the Melchizedek was lost in the book of the covenant. Was lost in the book of the law. It was lost in the book of the law. It could never happen with an imposed law. It could only happen with an agreed to, standing and ratified covenant. With the quantum level of physics that were actually in place within the Ark of the Covenant. Yahweh intended that. There's a quantum level of physics that vibrated from an intact, blood-ratified covenant that was then placed in the Ark of the Covenant. That was Yahweh's purpose, that then you could literally, as human beings, you could come to Yahweh, even if you was a sojourner, far off in the nations. You didn't know who Yahweh was. You were just walking through the desert and you're about to die and you found a well and it was named after Yahweh. You're like, well, I want to find out. This well saved my life. It's the name of a deity's on it. Who's the deity? The next thing you know, you're supposed to go and there's supposed to be a running Melchizedek priesthood because you're a kingdom of priests. And you go and guess what? As a human being, you are then transfigured and you attain the Melchizedek because the vibrations that are coming off of the intact covenant from the Ark of the Covenant go out to the people and the whole world becomes a basin for Yahweh's glory. That's perfect will. Leviticus 16:17. And there shall be no man in the tabernacle of the congregation. Does it say that? Listen, look at that. There shall be no man in the tabernacle of the congregation when he goes to make Keporah in the Kadosh place, until he comes out. And he made Keporah for himself and for his household and for all the congregation of Israel. Now Philo, the Jewish historian, he even understood what this meant. He understood that this passage meant he shall not be a man when he enters to make atonement. He shall not even be a man when he enters to make atonement, because you're going to be transfigured. You will be transfigured. You will not be a man. And Yeshua demonstrated that. He demonstrated that to his disciples. He demonstrated that with Moshe Rabbeinu and Elijah. By understanding the book of the covenant, we can attain the Melchizedek power of an indestructible life. And you will be able to walk into the kingdom. You won't die. You will be able to walk into the kingdom. I don't believe that. Well, you won't then. Fine. Okay, I can't help you out. I believe it. I am looking for a people of faith. He's not looking for a people of intellect. I tried that. Doesn't work. You just get proudful, puffed up. He says, I'm looking for a people of faith. Now, it's interesting, the corresponding text to what Lynn read in Melachim Bet 23, 2 Kings chapter 23, is, of course, 2 Chronicles chapter 34. You'll want to read those two. because it's very fascinating. But the difference between the two texts, the two passages, is that Melachim, kings, is a geographical recounting of events. We have to understand this. Remember, a text out of context creates a pretext, and error begets error. So Melachim Bet, 2 Kings, when we're talking about what happened with Josiah, is a geographical accounting. What does he mean? Well, it's talking about first small, right here, book. Then we go from book, a little bit bigger, to temple. Then from temple, we go a little bit bigger to city. And then from city, we go to nation. And then finally, we end up with a national Passover. It's a geographical expansion of events, starting small and is expanding. Does that make sense? Okay, that's 2 Kings. Whereas Chronicles is a chronological account of events. It's different. So it doesn't seem to, so people can read and get confused. It's not boring, really. It's not. It's because it's very important for us to understand these apparent discrepancies. There's no discrepancy. We have to understand what the writer is trying to communicate. And this is hugely significant to us. Why? Because I know that we found the book of the covenant and the book of the law. But the chronological account in Chronicles teaches us that first of all, you've got to begin the purging of yourself, then the purging of your household, then the purging of your congregations, before you'll even be able to receive the book of the law and the book of the covenant. And you know what? Well, I don't get that book of the covenant, but no, you've got to first clean your life up. You've got to be ready to receive. You've got to begin the purging of all of that stuff that they're doing tomorrow, amongst various other things, before you will ever be able to receive this, because this is not going to be thrown before the feet of everybody. I could never have received this when I was fully, I thought, in the Torah, into knowledge and all the Pharisaic. No way. You have to first do the purging, and it's a continual work. A continual work. So what really happened is Yoshiyahu began purging the temple, began purging all of the idolatry, and then the book of the covenant and the book of the law was found. And if you find the book of the law, you're going to find the book of the covenant, and vice versa, because the book of the law was placed outside the covenant as a witness against them. There's no conflict here. If you find one, you're going to find the other. Of course. So the difference between the two is, of course, geographical and chronological. And the chronological account tells us, first you purge yourself of the heathen ways and the corruptness and the sin in your life, the things that you need to give up. What are those things? Well, we've all got different struggles. It's definitely how we approach Yahweh with his feasts and festivals, for sure. But then there's all the addictions of the world, whether it be too much alcohol, too much worldliness, all these things. We've got to purge that up before we can begin to receive this book of the covenant. The reforms began after the purging. It's like Yeshua said, come and you shall see, come and you shall see. And finally, what we see is Josiah, Yoshiyahu's humility. It does postpone disaster. It does postpone disaster. So humility postpones disaster. But a reunion happens. I mean, we're talking about it. We've been talking about it for many years. The two houses of Israel coming back. We go out and teach the Torah, and you'll get the two houses of Israel back. But a reunion happens only when what? Both sides are committed. Exactly. When they found the book of the covenant. Then the reunion of the two houses of Israel happens. And when does it happen? at Passover. In Yoshiyahu's day, the reunion of the two houses of Israel, the north and the south, came together when they found the Book of the Covenant after they've done the purging, and they sat down at Passover. I hope some of you are getting this, because this is hugely profound to me. This is hugely profound to the steps of my life, and I hope to your lives. Because, I mean, am I just talking to myself? No. Okay, because I'm one. Okay. It's huge. Because a lot of you tomorrow are going to have to deal with some things in your family. It's going to be hard. You shut your mouth. What do you do? I mean, it's going to be tough. Some of you have already done those things. It's a continual purging. The warning is that even though a person who prepares the temple of Yahweh, like Yoshiyahu prepared the temple of Yahweh. If they prepare the temple of Yahweh, and they even prepare Yahweh's people, but if they prepare Yahweh's people for the book of the law hierarchy, which is what Josiah did, and they don't obey the word of Yahweh, even if it's from the mouth of somebody in the nations like the Pharaoh, then don't expect anything but judgment to follow. Because Josiah, he implemented the book of the law with all of the Levitical hierarchy. He didn't receive the word from somebody out in the nations, and it ended in his judgment. There's so many parallelisms. I mean, Yahweh's word is alive this season, this time of year. I mean, we've literally in our text, Josiah is destroying Easter. Do you realize that? He is literally destroying Easter. It's the Hebrew Ashtoreth. He is purging Easter. He's destroying Easter. How appropriate. He beats it to dust. Ashtoreth to dust. I mean, that's intentional. Where is that making my mind go? Directly back to when they broke the book of the covenant. It's the same language. It's even the same language. Destroying Easter. The very language points us back to the golden calf, because Josiah functions as a new Moshe Rabbeinu. He functions as a new Moshe Rabbeinu. Could Moshe ratify the book of the covenant? Could he? No, he couldn't, could he? He couldn't. He couldn't ratify it because they entered into the book of the law. He could just manage the book of the law. Josiah, likewise, as the functioning like a Moshe, he can't ratify it either. We ultimately had to wait until Yahweh sends Yeshua to ratify that covenant. We have to understand the implementation of the book of the law. When the book of the law is implemented like Josiah implemented it, would they still be keeping the commandments of the book of the covenant? John? Yes. But would they get any of the promises that were attached to the covenant? Zero. You see, the book of the law is keeping the commandments of the book of the covenant, as well as all of the imposing legislation of carnal ordinance that are a witness against you. But you're keeping all of that with none of the promises and none of the blessings. And a whole bunch more that brings cursing if you disobey it. You see, that's what people have to understand. It's not a this or that. It's a fact of, if you break that, you're going to keep it still, but you're not getting any of the blessings, any of the inheritance, and you're going to keep this too, which is going to manage you, legislate you, and if you break this, there's a bunch of cursings, because there's no curses in this. There's no national curses in the book of the covenant. There's just one family limited curse. It's amazing. So I'm just breaking this down to you more and more and more, because we'll hopefully go back and read these two texts and it will make even more sense to you. So the book of the law equals observing the commandments, the mitzvot of the book of the covenant, without the inheritance and covenant's blessings attached, with many additions and curses of the book of the law. The carnal commandments contained in ordinances added. And now you understand, hopefully, Maaseh Shlechim, Acts chapter 15, verse 10, when they said what? A yoke on my neck. The people, which neither our fathers nor we're able to bear. They couldn't even bear it. Could the people preceding Josiah, were they bearing it? They had sodomite booths in the temple of Yahweh under the book of the law. That is some crazy, despicable stuff. Sodomite booths in the temple of Yahweh. Under the book of the law. They couldn't even keep that. Now Hilkiah the Kohen Haggadah found the book of the law, and thereby the book of the covenant. He gave it to Shaphan the Sofer, the scribe, who showed it to Melech Yoshiyahu. Yoshiyahu took a stand for the covenant, and he reinstituted the book of the law, the Levitical ordinances, and the Passover sacrifices. And what did that do? In his zeal, Yoshiyahu purged all traces of Melchizedek rights and Book of the Covenant rights. He purged everything. Anything that was Melchizedek was included in that because he instituted the Book of the Law. In his zeal for a return, he deemed anything non-Levitical impure, which would include Melchizedek. And you wonder why it's so hard to find our way back, right? But we're doing it. But you and I, you see, we are not heirs to the book of the law part of Torah. We're the heirs of those who rejected the book of the law. We're heirs of those who rejected its priesthood. We're heirs of those that reject its rights. Because our roots should extend all the way back to the Garden of Eden. You want Hebrew roots? I want Edenic roots. I want it to go all the way back. Because before Hebrew roots, Abraham was the first Hebrew because he crossed over. That's great. You'll most probably end up with the book of the law. I want the Edenic roots. It's really taken, and we've spoken about this for years, but we've never really been able to, what does that look like? How do you literally, it's a concept, but it's no longer a concept. We're literally being given stones to walk on. We are literally being given stones to walk on how to get back there. And Yahweh is with me, just like you. He's not laying it all out. I can't give you the A to Z of the Melchizedek. I haven't a clue. I maybe got the A and the B. And you know what? I'm going to walk on those stones, and he's going to give me more. And I know it, because it happens every single day. And I'm sure it's happening with you too. More, and it's coming quick. It is. Is it not? Do you testify to that? It's faster. It is coming faster. Faster like I have never, ever experienced. It's amazing. It's amazing.
It makes you want everybody around you to get it.
I know it. I know it.
It's humbling and showing it to us.
So our roots extend to the Eden temple traditions of the Melchizedek, which were eradicated fully by King Josiah when he cleansed the temple of anything non-Levitical. Now, Messianic's ideas, and I group myself with that for many years, and my understandings in the past were of the temple. Where were they gleaned from? They were all gleaned from the Second Temple period. Because that's where Judaism goes, that's where Messianic goes. So you start to glean anything temple-orientated from the Second Temple period. But that's a broken book of the law, corrupt system. It was so corrupt that Josiah was the only one that made a change. And did it last to the next generation? Didn't even last to the next generation. Didn't even last. And I'm sorry. I'm just going to step on some toes. the Christian bookstores are absolutely filled with books on Islam, the Antichrist, and Islam this and Islam that, exposing Islam. The New York Times talks, people can leave Islam, and it's accolades are given to them. They're awarded, and that's great. How come that the Christian bookstores aren't filled with the occult that Judaism and Pharisaicism is? Because last time I checked, Yeshua was the one that truly told us what it was. It should be filled that the Talmud is satanic and occult literature. They're not serving Yahweh. It's a god of religion. And they use the scripture as a backdrop to be able to do that. But if you said that, oh my goodness. Most of the Palestinians are Jews, for crying out loud. Who was the first prime minister of Israel? Ben-Gurion. Before he was prime minister, he was a historian. Even he admitted that they were Fehalim. They were the original Jewish inhabitants of the land that held onto the land, but they couldn't afford to pay the jihaz tax in 680 when Saladin later came in and imposed even stricter jihaz tax on them. So guess what? They converted to Islam, not because they wanted to serve Allah, but because they had a strict hold to the promises and they held onto the land. And if they converted to Islam, they wouldn't have to pay the tax. And they could stay there. Even the historian David Ben-Gurion recognized that, but it was not expedient for Zionism to take the historical truth of that. So guess what? Now here we are 60 years later, and we have a whole people that are racially denigrated based upon falsification of history. It's insane. It's insane. And this is what people are buying into. Anyway, I went on a tangent there. But the thing is, Messianic ideas and understandings of the temple are gleaned from the Second Temple period, which was Zerubbabel's temple, Herod's temple. They do not come from the Eden Melchizedek temple. They don't convey the enlightenment of the Psalm 110 temple, which is heavenly. So that Psalm 110 temple, which is heavenly, then became Edenic. It became Edenic. Look what Yeshayahu, Isaiah 57, verse 7 says. Upon a proud and high mountain have you set your bed. It's talking about the temple of the book of the law, the Levitical temple. On a proud and high mountain have you set your bed. Oh yeah, it was a bed because of the despicable whoring that was going on inside of it. Even there you went up to offer sacrifices. Behind the doors also in the posts have you set up your remembrance. For you have gone up and uncovered yourself to another other than me. They're not serving Yahweh. The Pharisees weren't serving Yahweh. They weren't serving Yeshua's father. He told them that. And Judaism today is birthed out of first century Mishnah. Mishnah, which then got compilated into Talmud, is the oral commentaries of the very Pharisees that were there talking to Yeshua. That's Mishnah, which is then being compilated into Talmud. And we'll slam Islam. Let's slam Islam. And hey, I've been doing it for years. But how about we speak a little bit of truth too? Because people like John Hagee and many, many Christian churches are so put it up on a pedestal.
Nobody wants to admit that they're a church.
It's in the Bible. It's clear. It's very clear. Yeshua spoke to that, and we need to speak to that if we're going to truly follow him. And he goes on to say, behind the doors also and the posts have you set up your remembrance. For you have gone up and uncovered yourself to another other than me. You have enlarged your bed and made a covenant with them also. You loved their bed where you saw their hand. So that second temple was a whore. The whore who made a mockery even of the Levitical priestly system. Made a mockery even of the book of the law. Now in Isaiah, Yeshayahu 66 verse 3, he continues to say, they that kill an ox as if they slew a man. I mean, they weren't even doing it according to Vayikra, Leviticus. They that sacrifice a lamb as if they cut off a dog's neck. It's outrageous. They that offer a grain offering as if they offered pig's blood. They that burns incense as if they blessed an idol. Now, I told you earlier about that. The smoking of drugs, what are you offering? You're offering incense to the god that is associated with that drug. It's nothing new. It's idol worship. And then you get empowered by the god, the false god, the demon associated with that drug, and you get the enlightenment for a time. You never fully attain it. It's the promise of attainment, and then you go over the other side and you need to try and attain it again. That's all it is. It's nothing. There is nothing new under the sun. These drugs have been in circulation for thousands of years. It is literally offering incense to the demon, and the demon then comes in and enlightens you, and that's the high. You never attain quite where you want to attain, so you go back and offer more incense, and Satan gets more and more empowered, and that is the world that we live in today. And eventually you die from an overdose, because the wages of sin is death. We need to warn our young people. Warn our young people. They that kill an ox as if they slew a man. They that sacrifice a lamb as if they cut off a dog's neck. They that offer a grain offering as if they offered pig's blood. They that burn incense as if they blessed an idol. Yes, they have chosen their own halachot, their ways, and their beings delight in their own abominations. I mean, how many of us are going to stand up and say, I reject that Levitical hierarchy. I reject that second temple system. Yochanan HaMatbil, John the Immerser, he did it. He did it. He rejected it. And he was a rightful heir to it. Because our altar is outside the gates of that system, of which those priests serving that system, they have no right to eat. No right, no authority, no right to eat. That's Hebrews 13:10. Many Kohanim rejected. Many of the priests, they rejected the book of the law, and they became obedient to the book of the covenant in Yeshua's time. Will we do the same, or will we just keep on trucking? We'll keep on doing what they're doing tomorrow, and everything convenient and religious. And we can reflect it on ourselves, and we can have false piety. Because we need to actually move altars. We need to move altars, we need to move priesthoods, and we need to move temples. And if you don't want to do that, then that's your problem. But that is what we're commanded to do. And we see it. Even the priests that were raised up from little boys, they had everything to lose. I mean, that man that had spittle and mud in his eye, he was healed by Yeshua. And the kind of rejection that there was even in the synagogue was so intense in the community that his parents, did they want to testify to the truth? No, because the type of persecution in the local congregation was so much that they wouldn't even testify to their sons seeing sight. Now take that and multiply it by 100, no, 1,000, a Levitical chosen priest family, raised up from childhood to go and serve in the temple. What kind of persecution would happen to their family if they turned their back on that and walked away and started following Yeshua and the book of the covenant? Because in Acts chapter 6 verse 7, and the word of Yahweh increased, And the number of the Talmudim multiplied in Jerusalem greatly. And a large group, not a small group, a large group of the priests and others from the Jewish faith were obedient to the Netzarim Emunah. The Netzarim Emunah is the book of the covenant. There's a whole book of the Bible that clearly testifies what the faith of the Nazarenes is. They left it and they went to an altar outside the gates. The book of Enoch suggests that the builders of the second temple were impure apostates, and the second temple was actually the age of wrath. And I don't want to limit my return that Yahweh has ordained in my life and your life to the book of the law division of Torah. We need to return to the Eden temple. Adam was the priest or the high priest under the order of Melchizedek. Death reigned from Adam to Moshe. Adam lost access to the menorah of enlightenment. Why? Because he followed another fallen high priest of the order of Melchizedek, Satan. In Ezekiel 28, we see that Satan is called the Messiah who covers. He was the one who wore the stones embedded in the Melchizedek high priest's breastplate. And last week we touched on the 3 stones and the meaning of those 3 stones that were absent, which is very powerful. We need to return to the place and the priesthood from which we've been driven. That's what Yeshua taught. Yeshua's divinity was embraced, his priesthood recognized, because the restoration of the Eden temple practices and beliefs that were absent in Jerusalem were anticipated with fervor at the time of Yeshua's ministry. And what we're seeing, the fruit of the Messianic movement, is that Yeshua's divinity is being rejected. That's going to happen with the book of the law. That's the fruit of it. You don't need faith. The law is not of faith, Paul talks about. The covenant is what is of faith, because it's got inheritance and heritage and promises and land access. It's amazing. The ancient Jerusalem kings, before the imposing of the book of the law, had been priests in the manner of the Melchizedek. That's why he shows up at the battle of Shemalomagar with Abraham. Because the Melchizedek represented the older faith. Yeshua espoused the faith of Abraham, the Melchizedek rites. Now, we've inherited, and it's my own fault too, and I've taught it to you guys, so when I'm wrong, I come up and I tell it, I'm wrong. We've inherited it. Many of our prayers now in the Hebrew roots movement are in the fathers, right? Abraham, we pray, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Where did we inherit that from? Judaism. Why? Why? Well, they can still say that. Why do they say that? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Who are the last fathers that were in covenant? The book of the covenant. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But we pray, Yeshua taught us to pray how? In his name, because he's the one that has brought us back into right covenant, book of the covenant standing. You pray to the Father in my name. That's powerful. Judaism would rather you keep praying in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's nothing wrong with that if you don't know Yeshua. See, so that's another huge paradigm shift for me this week. That really is going to change my morning prayers. See? Because it should change your life. The ancient Jerusalem kings, before the imposing of the book of the law, had been priests in the manner of Melchizedek, and it represents the older faith. Rav Shaliach Shaul, the Apostle Paul, understood this. Melchizedek rites were rooted earlier than the book of the law division of Torah, because the book of the law division of Torah was imposed at Mount Sinai. Romans 4:13. Look at this. Romans 4:13. Listen to the language. Remember, book of the covenant language is promise, inheritance, heritage. Book of the law language is imposed, not faith, until a time of. For the promise that he should be the heir of the Olam Hazeh was not to Abraham or to his Zerah through the book of the law, but through Zedekah of his Emunah, through the righteousness, Zedekah, Malki, Zadik of his faith. For if those who are of the book of the law alone are the heirs, faith is made void, and the promise made of none effect, because the book of the law works wrath, for where no book of the law is, there is no transgression. Right? Because the book of the law was imposed because of the transgression of the golden calf. That text makes sense. I'll read it again. It's insane how much sense that text makes. Because we have been doing some funny stuff with that to try and make it make sense. Well, it's the oral law, it's not the written law. Where does it say that? Well, where does it say book of the law? Where does it say book of the covenant? Read the Torah, read 2 Kings. It's everywhere. It's imposed. For the promise is book of the covenant, heritage, language, that should be the heir, of course, is book of the covenant language, of the Olam Hazeh, was not to Abraham or to his seed through the book of the law. Clearly. But through the Zedekah of his faith, through the righteousness of his faith. For if those who are of the book of the law alone are the heirs, Emunah, faith, is made void, because there is no heirs in the book of the law. The law doesn't have heirs. And the promise made of none effect. The promise, the covenant of promise, Ephesians 2, because the book of the law works wrath, for where no book of the law is, there is no transgression. There's no golden calf incident, and you're still in covenant. It's amazing. Now, the Qumran community expected Melchizedek to appear. They truly did. That's what they were doing. I mean, have you been to Qumran? I mean, it's a hot, dusty place. What would you be doing down there? They couldn't be up in Jerusalem because it was such a whore. That temple system was so corrupt. They couldn't. I mean, really, if you're on fire to Yahweh, I would be as far away from those sodomite booths as possible. Nothing. Nothing. No way. There's no way. And if there was a community and they're living down in the desert and they're into ritual immersion, sanctification, holiness, marriage, families, children, and they're looking for the Melchizedek, I'm there. I mean, it just makes sense to me. Plus, it's kind of good to be out of the city because you never know what happened. You know, maybe there'll be another Antiochus that'll come in. I mean, it would make sense to me. I would go. So the Qumran community expected the Melchizedek to appear exactly when Yeshua began his public ministry. I've also taught that Yeshua, those missing years from 12 to 30, Yeshua was with the Qumran community. And there's a huge support of that. So was Yochanan HaMatbil. That he was with the Qumran community. He was being raised up. Now, the description of the Melchizedek is exactly how Yeshua is presented in the Gospels. The Melchizedek's Eden temple was a wilderness temple. It was the world of Yochanan HaMatbil because it was a wilderness temple. Yochanan HaMatbil was the legitimate high priest. John the Baptist was a legitimate high priest, not Caiaphas. And his temple was a wilderness temple because the righteous temple was an Eden wilderness temple. There's no confusion. There's no conflict. He said, I tear this piece of thing down in 3 days. The stones? And if these stones don't even acknowledge me, you don't acknowledge me, these stones, they'll cry out. I mean, people really don't believe that stuff. I teach my kids that all the time. You know, one day the stones will talk. Trees will talk and walk. You're crazy. Well, you got no faith. Fine. It's true. I mean, they really will. Unless you want to call Yeshua a liar, because he believed it. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. Some crazy stuff. I love it. Hosanna means save us. The high priest would bear the name on his forehead as the sin bearer of Israel. You see that in John. The high priest would cleanse the temple by sprinkling 7 times within the Holy of Holies. That's how the high priest would cleanse the temple. And then 7 times on the temple veil, up and down. And it was a movement even described in the first century by the historians. They described this movement of how the high priest would cleanse the temple 7 times. And they used this in the historic documents. It was called the cleansing of the whip. And now you understand what exactly Yeshua was doing. He was cleansing the temple. He was cleansing the temple. In the letter of Barnabas, it is written, the priests used to eat the holiest portion of the sacrificed goat, raw and mixed with sour wine vinegar. Now you understand why Yeshua was given the sour wine vinegar. That's in the epistle of Barnabas. The faithful understood that the high priest became one with the blood as he was offering it inside the veil. He was both high priest and offering. Can you see why Yeshua's sacrifice, high priesthood, and resurrection was so easily embraced by thousands in his day? I mean, it was easily embraced. Today, you know, UFOs and Darwinism are easily embraced, but you try and get the faith out, I mean, all this pagan nonsense, you know, that's fine because it's not going to cost you anything. You may even get some chocolate. The text in circulation at Yeshua's time was, of course, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Dead Sea Scrolls of Isaiah 61 is very telling. This is what it says. Look at Isaiah 61 in your Bibles, and I'll read you it from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And of course, this is from Qumran. And this again goes back to what John and I were having a conversation about, that the Melchizedek was slain before the foundation of the world, that the Melchizedek, and then linguistically, I mean, it opens up your brain. Dead Sea Scrolls of Isaiah 61, your Elohim is Melchizedek. Yeshua claimed to be the Melchizedek. He claimed to be Elohim. He claimed to be divine. Luke 4:21, this day, right in front of all those people, he claims his divinity. That's why they wanted to stone him. He says, because he was reading what? What was he reading? Isaiah 61, but he wasn't reading the Mickey Mouse text that the Masoretes changed in 1000 of the Common Era because they hate Yeshua 134 bloody times. He was reading the Dead Sea Scroll version, which was stating that your Elohim is the Melchizedek deity. And he says, this day, this piece of scripture is fulfilled in your hearing. Boom. And what did they want to do? Stone him and throw him over a cliff. And you miss that when you read the Mickey Mouse text. You see? Revelation 2:17, John was describing the restoration of the Edenic down here and heavenly temple that are connected through the Melchizedek rites. Adam wasn't created from the dust of the Temple Mount that Judaism teaches. He was created from the dust of the Kedosh HaKedoshim, or the Holy of Holies. The very altar of Yeshua upon one of the mountains of Moriah. Remember, there were more than one mountains of Moriah. One of the mountains of Moriah is the Mount of Olives. Yeshua and his followers, they opposed the second temple. They opposed everything that it had become. He prophesied its destruction. They identified themselves as the true temple, and Yeshua as the true high priest. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Yeshua was actually proclaiming the prophecy of Enoch, which was a book that was regarded as scripture in the time of Yeshua. Now in Enoch chapter 90 verse 28, it is written, "And I stood up to see till they had folded up that old house, and carried off all the pillars and all the beams and ornaments of the house, were at the same time folded up with it, and they carried it off, and they laid it in a place in the south of the land. And I saw till the master of the sheep brought a new house, greater and loftier than the first, and set it up in the place where the first which had been folded up." So the Dead Sea Scrolls show us that the book of Enoch was one of the most widely used books in the time of Yeshua. The Moshiach from the Melchizedek would destroy the temple, and what does it say? Look, listen. He would bring a new house, greater and loftier than that first, and set it up in the place of the first which had been folded up. If you've got eyes to see and ears to hear, it's talking about that the temple would be destroyed, and that the Melchizedek would be the one ultimately that would destroy the temple, be crucified and resurrected as a new temple. The second temple was empty. Understand that, brethren. There was none of the vibrations that were supposed to be in there. None. There was no ark. There was no throne. There was no mercy seat. There was no Etz Chaim menorah. There was no tree of life menorah. None of that was there. And people forget that. See all these pictures of the second temple and it's got all that stuff in it. It wasn't in it. It was empty. Didn't even have the appropriate things. The book of Revelation instructs us to expect a fully furnished Holy of Holies, complete with throne and malachim, angels. John the Revelator is to be remembered as a high priest who wore the name on his forehead. Yeshua was the true high priest who had taught the secrets to his followers. And in Hebrews 9:5 it is written, "And over it the cherubim, the cherubims of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we won't now speak of in detail, because it's very deep and it's a sewed mystery." Then in Kepha Aleph, 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 12, "To them it was revealed that they weren't really serving themselves, but were ministering to us the things which now have been reported to you through those who have been proclaimed, the Besorah, the gospel to you by the Ruach HaKodesh, which was sent from the Shamayim's heaven, things which heavenly malachim, angels, desire to look into." The Holy of Holies. So the invisible creation is beyond the veil. Within the Holy of Holies is the invisible creation beyond the veil. Outside of the Holy of Holies is matter and time. But the ritual within the Holy of Holies takes place in eternity because it links you to the heavenly temple before the creation of the visible world and matter.